Awesome, everybody. Thank you for joining today. It's TAM Lab 29, July 25th. My name is Bill, and I'm going to be presenting on fun with platform services controllers and vCenter. So agenda. So what are we going to do? I'm going to explain the customer use case. Right, I have a customer that has a need for this, and so I thought, let's turn this into a TAM Lab. Explain the environment and what we're going to do. So first off, the use case, right? Some context and background. So I have a customer that has 3 vCenters in enhanced link mode with all external PSCs. One for servers, one for VDI, and one for IaaS. So they call it IaaS, it's their VRA environment. And due to some requirements for VDI, specifically NVIDIA grid cards, they're finding it easier just to split out the VDI vCenter from an operational perspective, right? How do they handle it internally with the different teams that manage different components? Right, so they want to move that VDI vCenter out into its own little standalone vCenter and PSC. They know that we're moving to embedded, which is nice. That's not a shock, and they want to keep the same SSO config, right? So for this lab, it's just the default vSphere.local, but they've configured their SSO domain appropriate for what they think is necessary for their environment. They'd rather not change that. Keep certain things, some automation they have in place and whatnot, easier. So what does this look like? Well, let's use that as the catalyst for this. So the lab environment that we're working in, again, I don't have a really cool home lab. I have VMware Workstation. So inside there, I have an ESX host and 2 SSO domains. So one, there's a vCenter I spun up for this with 2 platform services controllers, and then another one just hanging out with no vCenter. And those represent the SSO domains that my customer would have. So we're going to be working primarily in domain number 1 there to start with, and then we'll switch some stuff over to domain number 2. With that, I'm going to go ahead and flip over to the lab. So this is what we got going on. We have our 1 lab vCenter, and you can crack this guy open. Oh, and to get here, you move into administration through the menu, and then system configuration. Right, so we can crack these guys open and get a lot of really good information. Right, first we see this is a vCenter with an external PSC. Very cool. And you can see this vCenter is pointing to PSC01. Right. Now we have 2 vCenters or PSCs in this environment, PSC01 and 02. And you can see here their replication partners are each other. And I'm not sure if people have seen this. This could be really handy for customers, but there's this nice view as topology link. And if you click that, it's not a very complex environment in my lab, but we might find with other customers, this could be a different story, right? This tells this gives a nice representation of what's going on. This dotted line is fine. It just means it's an external PSC connection with the solid line meaning some replication between the 2. So as we proceed through the lab, we'll come back to here periodically and just validate the work that we're doing. Anyway, so from there, I'm just pulling up my notes. So at this point, I want to repoint, right? This is a fun little activity. I want to repoint the lab vCenter from 01 to 02. Pretty straightforward process. One thing I want to show, and it's kind of nice, if we select a PSC and hit decommission, and I just want to call this out now, this is not how we're going to do it. It's going to say, you need to move a vCenter off or convert them to an embedded node or something, right? Before we can actually decommission it, which is really nice. And so we'll find that later on. I wanted to call that out now because just to show there's some level of protection that the vSphere environment won't let you shoot yourself in the foot necessarily. And I appreciate that. So I'm going to go ahead and, to do this, we need to log in. I'll open up a putty session, right? So we're going to go here. Perfect. Hopefully the text is big enough. I'm recording this text here in a text file. I'll include it with the components from this meeting on the TAM Lab site. So at any point, if you want to grab that output and see what's going on, by all means, you'll be available to do that. So it's a real simple command here. There's a utility called CMSSO util, and that's going to let us do a lot of things here. Specifically this one, I'm logged into the lab vCenter. I'm going to go ahead and point it to PSC02. Okay. Pretty straightforward. It's doing some checks to make sure things are up. As part of my lab prep work, I was in an instance where PSC02 was down, and it, gave me the bird. And so what we're going to see in the back here is vCenter services are going to restart, and that's going to be a common theme that we're going to find throughout the different steps in this lab. Is that vCenter services just, I think naturally, and it makes sense, will restart. There's one point towards the end where you scratch your head like, really? You needed to restart there, but apparently that's the case. So that's running. I'm going to show you another thing I like to do here. I'm going to swing over another SSH session. Is I like watching the log, right? Because we don't always know what's going on. We can look at the VAMI. Sometimes we get a sense of what's going on, but I'm just gonna follow a log file here. Var log VMware. So under var log VMware, there's a messages file or log, and so we can go ahead and follow that. And let me just make this a little bigger here. So you can start seeing, things stopping service, reloading, starting. In my lab environment, our customers are going to be different because it's prod or highly used other environments potentially. This is a pretty silent log until actions are going on, right? So I don't necessarily know the order that things are going to happen, but just for me, seeing the flow of messages implies that there's some other things that are restarting. I'll also pull open VAMI here. So this is for the lab vCenter, and check out the services. Right, so the ones I'm going to care about, right, are vCenter server. Okay, well that's stopped. You can see there's a handful that are starting. So we see the database is starting here. I'm also going to be looking for the VMware vSphere client. So that's also starting as well. That's going to be the HTML5 interface, the web client being the Flash UI. So we're going to go ahead and let this thing finish. Try as I might to speed this thing up, it's a bit challenging. So we just have to let it do its thing. Make sense so far what we're doing? Might be on mute. Okay.
We're happily following along on mute.
I love it. That is fantastic. Now, some of the lab activities that we're going to have in here today leverage vSphere 6.7 functionality. Specifically, the last one where we are actually the middle one where we're actually moving from one SSO domain to the other. Right, moving from one to we'll call it an external domain, for lack of a better term. The idea being mergers and acquisitions happen. There are logical reasons why you need to peel off infrastructure, and that's been very challenging up until 6.7. Right, so we're going to leverage this. My customers on 6.5, and they recognize that, and so part of their migration plan to pull this out is to get vSphere up to 6.7 so they can actually do this. So keep that in mind. If this is something at all interesting to your customers, that they need to be on 6.7 for the external kind of remapping. So keep this log up here, start seeing as more and more things happen. refresh this. vCenter has started, great. And the client is starting, so we're almost back. Now it's interesting, and I feel like I need to go put some money down in Las Vegas on this one. But periodically, if you load the VAMI at just the right time, it will actually show that it's not configured. It has the interface of the initial setup. So don't be alarmed if you happen to see that as well. It's just you loaded the VAMI at just the right time for that to happen. You know, give it 10, 15 seconds and it'll remember where its brain's at. Okay, just come back here. All right, saying vSphere client has started, vCenter is started. So let me go ahead and just reload and see what it says. Yep, we'll just wait another minute. Just because the client has started doesn't mean it's all there. Summary services. Healthy with warnings, okay. All right. Cool, so now that this is coming back up, we're going to want to look for validation that the work we did was successful. And so one of the first obvious places that I see it here is now that I'm logging in to the vSphere client, I'm seeing PSC02 external, right? And if we go back here, you can see that that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm repointing to that platform services controller. So that's great. So I'll go ahead and log in. And this should take us back to the administration section that we were just in. There we go. Now this would be useful for a number of activities, including maybe there's a PSC that's needs to be, maybe it's freaking out for whatever reason, right? Or maybe it's failing, or it's a part of an infrastructure that's having issues, something like that. So just to go in to run a single command to point it to another PSC is really nice. You guys might have other use cases. Feel free to share those with the rest of the group, but that'd be fantastic. Now here, let me go ahead. Let's help validate this a little more. So I'm going to look at my vCenter here again. And now you can see it's PSC02, right? Whereas previously it was 01. I'm going to crack these guys open, and this is the same. They're still replication partners with each other, right? So all we did was just point this. We just changed this 1 to a 2. And if I do the view as topology, you'll notice this has changed just a little bit. Now the vCenter, if I hover over it, the little dotted line is pointing at PSC02. So, what happened here, right? We restarted vCenter services after we ran a single command. So keep that in mind with your customers. What's the level of interruption? It's going to depend on a number of things probably, but it's just the equivalent of start restarting vCenter services. So that's pretty awesome. So that's done. So we're going to move on to our next task. Any before we do that, any questions, thoughts, whatever? Oh, I hear crickets. Perfect. I'll keep moving on then. I'm going to log into this ESX host. So this is a limitation of my home lab, which is I don't have a lot of resources available, right? So I need to juggle a couple things here. So what I'm going to do first is, since my lab vCenter is now pointing at PSCO2, I'm going to go ahead and shut this guy down. There we go, shut down. That's going to free up some resources so I can run the PSC for this external SSO domain. So that's on its way. The next thing I'm going to do is do some snapshots. So in this process that we have coming up, there's a check, a pre-check that we're going to do, and then also an execution. And during the execution, if there is a problem, there is a flag set on both the PSC and the vCenter. And the flag says, there was a failure, restore from backup. Like, that's it. You kind of get one chance. You don't, I haven't found a way to clear the flag and let you try it again. And we all know that snapshots aren't true backups, but for the sake of what we're trying to accomplish here, it'll be fine. I'd recommend that, you know, we tell our customers to take a backup as well, just in case. So I'll just say, you know, take a snapshot of that guy, and I'll take a snapshot of PSCO2. There we go. And then I'll take one of PSCO3, which should be the quickest of all of them. A snapshot, there we go. I read this in the documentation, and in haste, in one of my run-throughs of this, I did not snapshot. And of course, I was monkeying around too much and messed it all up and had to redo everything. So I learned the hard way. This can be painful. All right, so with that, I have some snapshots. This one's just about done, perfect. I'm gonna start up the other SSO domain. So PSCO3, oh, there you go, power on. So that guy should be joining. Here we go. PSCO1's no longer really relevant. So I'll go ahead and X that. Ideally, having all of the resources in the world and all the time in the world, I would have decommissioned PSCO1 when we're done, because I didn't need that anymore. It takes a lot of time, not really relevant for the TAM Lab, so I'll just go ahead and shut it off. So we'll come back here. I want to see a blue screen to show that this is up, and then we'll move on. So let me get, here we go. All right, so this next step is going to be similar to what we did before with the excuse me, with the CMSSO util command. And so what we're going to do is we're going to run through a pre-check, and it's going to compare a couple settings on both sides to make sure things look good. And we'll also get a little validation of the process it's going to go through, which is nice. Again, this being a kind of one and done, unless you Control C out of it or hit N at the would you like to proceed. It's just nice to have that here. So PSC, so I think I saw the blue screen. Maybe. We'll say I did. Oh, it was there. Okay, so with that, we're back into the lab vCenter. We've SSH'd in. We're going to run this command. It's going to be the pre-check. And so here, let's walk through this. So we're going to do domain repoint, but we're doing a pre-check. And we're going to, so the source Admin account is administrator. There we go. The destination, right? So what's the destination PSC? Well, it's PSC03. And the admin account is administrator. And the destination domain name is vsphere.local. Great, all very straightforward. Obviously change things as you need to here. And one thing to note, that the administrator username there does not require fully qualified with the domain after it. Again, customers might run into that. That won't cause the flag to say you need to restore from backup, which is really nice. But it'll cause an error, and it's not really straightforward on what that error is. It just says invalid credentials. So I'll go ahead and run this, and it's going to ask for credentials for both sides, their passwords. So here's my source. Here's my destination. I'll make this a little bigger. Cool. Okay, so let's see what we have here. Global permissions for the source will be lost. Okay, and so the admin must add global permissions manually once this thing moves. Administrator vsphere.local will be assigned the admin role on the source. Okay. Default resolution. This is important for tags and authorization is copy unless overwritten. Right. So as you add tags over, it will it'll move licenses, tags, and certain other kinds of data with it. Because that's relevant for that vSphere environment, so it will copy those over. If there's conflicts, we'll start seeing them in this pre-check. Again, for speed and whatever else, I didn't really populate the environment with a lot of that information, just because, right? So be aware that that's a thing, and the pre-check should help identify. So. I'm gonna go ahead here. Oh, here's your backup notice. Back it up. Otherwise, you should cancel it. So I'm gonna go ahead and move ahead with the check. Where I've seen it fail before is this auth-z data export. There we go. Pre-check is successful. So at this point, in theory, we should be good. So I'll go ahead and run the command again. Let me just, for sake of this, clear the screen. So, you know, walking through the command that we had before, this time we have domain repoint mode execute. So instead of doing the pre-check, we're actually going to go ahead and do this. And so this is where we have the snapshots. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And we'll get the same message, which is great. This time what we're going to find is the messages that we get showing up on screen are now different. So it's not just validating auth-z, validating licenses and things of that nature. Now we're actually seeing data being exported, right? And it's going to copy the data over and reload it. And again, restart vCenter services. So we should be able to see, if I move over here, we'll start seeing these log file or log entries start scrolling by as it's doing stuff. So let's just be patient with this. This will probably take a couple minutes. Has anybody out there run into a customer that wants to do something like this? Or had needed to and just spun up a new environment and migrated everything? No?
I've got a customer actually using still a lot of vSphere and external PSCs with 6.0. And they're, I think the long-term goal, of course, they realize is they need to move to external PS or to the embedded PSCs again, but they have yet to really engage in a game plan on how to do that. So they're sort of putting off the inevitable, but yeah, I might be circling back around on you with something like this.
Yeah, perfect. You know, and we've also had, some very smart people out in the V community develop a number of scripts, right, to either repopulate a home lab or even to do some of this migration work, because moving tags, for example, from one environment to the next can be a bear, and it's very important, right? Especially a lot of automation and backups and CMDB, all these things work with tags, right? So to have that included with this process makes it so much more valuable, because it's a risk balance, right? Is it really worth it to migrate to a new PSC? There you go. We start seeing some stuff going on. If there's a lot of work that goes into moving all of this data, is it really worth it? Well, this certainly helps. And that's awesome. So you can see down here, it was real quick, right? Once it started exporting the data and everything else, we see leaving source PSC, joining the SSO domain vsphere.local on PSC03. That was pretty quick, right? Now we're just cramming that data in so that PSC03 is now relevant to what we want to do. So that's pretty exciting. I think, Scott, to your comment about your customer and being on 6.0 and all of that stuff, we always want to promote them being on more modern versions, stuff like that. 6 is still supported and all that, but I think they're going to benefit by getting to 6.7 because what we'll see in the next step of the Converge tool, gosh, it's so much easier and so much more, we'll say, attainable for people that aren't comfortable with the command line or comfortable with APIs, right? To have the tool within vCenter is really nice, and again, makes things really easy. Now, keep in mind there's a little bit of contention going on my machine. There's not a lot of resources, but this is effectively the most vanilla vCenter and PSC install. They're tiny instances, so there's not a lot of resources, CPU and RAM, but there's no ESX host. There's no other users, things like that. And pay attention to how long this is taking to load practically no data, if you will, no customization. So when you're working with a customer in this scenario, there is some time, right, that this is going to take, and this potentially, could impact backups, right? This could impact administration of the environment and things of that nature, because essentially we're loading the data and then there's going to be a vCenter services restart. It's always interesting to understand the magnitude of the impact, right? So we can start seeing some more services or some more activities, importing the licenses, whatever auth Z data is. I'm assuming that's going to be something along the lines of permissions and things of that nature. Now, one thing I'm not sure about, and this will be another thing we'd have to consider with our customers, and I was just thinking about it this morning, I wish I would have thought about this as well, is certificates and how this handles moving a custom certificate over from one PSC to another, if there's any implications, or even if there are, the customer wanted to run the different certificate modes, right, where it's either an intermediate CA or you replace all of the services and machine certificates, or what. So I'm not sure what that impact would be. So kind of feel like that would be version 2 of this lab, or maybe, the next modules, if you will, is maybe some of the more advanced, things that a customer might run into. And so here we go, starting all services, and we can see that here. We're restarting vSphere or VMware, vCenter services. I'll log into, hopefully it didn't time out. So here's my lab vCenter VAMI. Let's see what the services look like. They look like a spinning wheel. Here we go. So again, looking for, let's see, Postgres is started, which is great. vCenter server, perfect. That's showing us started. The client is starting, so we're in a good spot. I'm going to refresh. There we go. I'll keep this up for just another minute. We'll see who wins. I like this. By using the Repoint tool, you agree to take the responsibility for creating backups. It's not our fault. We told you in yellow text and more words and our documentation, take backups. Okay, so vSphere client is still showing as starting. Be kind of nice if maybe one day we could have a little more information in that. I think our customers would like to know what's going on beyond just starting. Maybe some of our more advanced customers, maybe. I get a little antsy, so it's always fun to just see what's going on. Still starting. All right. I guess while we're waiting, I have a question for everybody here. What's been the response from your customers that you're seeing as far as our move from external and now moving to the embedded PSC? Are people generally in support of that, or what are you finding?
Since nobody else is commenting, I will.
Thank you,
Most
Mike.
of my customers are just asking me, why? Why do I need to change? Why did VMware change? What's the logic behind it? They're looking for some justification so that when they have to have that conversation internally, that they've got something to fall back on other than the, that's what VMware did, so we're just gonna, we're gonna follow it.
Interesting. Okay. I found my customers, as I explain it to them, they're generally understanding, and part of the explanation I give, right? I'm not product team, right? I'm not going to officially represent all of their reasons because I don't necessarily understand them. But what I'm sharing is we're looking for an opportunity to reduce complexity, and what we're finding is PSC services work really well within the vCenter, right? And we reduce complexity. We reduce the need for things like load balancers, right? I have one customer who goes out and buys very expensive load balancers just for PSCs. And so they're happy and sad that they made the investment, but they no longer need to. So, just trying to explain it's us maturing, but also paying attention to what our customer experience is like and saying, we could probably make this easier. And it'll end up resulting in some, maybe more stable environments. I know I've seen a couple customers have issues with vCenter HA, excuse me. And, the recommendation is if you can move to internal or embedded PSC, you might have better stability. Which is a really interesting observation. Anyway, so back to this real quick. You notice the green text popped up. Repoint was successful. That's really exciting. As a customer, I would be, I don't know, maybe taking a drink, celebrating that there was not an error and I didn't have to restore from backup. So go ahead and log back in, and we should be able to see a very similar validation that we did before, that the work we did was successful. So let's go ahead. There we go. Look at this, PSC 03. Fantastic. And if we go back and look at the command that we ran up here. There it is, PSC 03, right? So great. So far, so good. Okay. Cool. And again, it's very nice. It takes us right back in to our system configuration. So no navigation to get here. Well, this is a big change, right? Now we have one less platform services controller. We've also incremented the number from 2 to 3. And you can see this has no replication partner. It's its own PSC and its own SSO domain, and we're pointing to it. And if we look at the view as topology, it's super boring. We're going to try and make it even more boring with the things that we're doing next, right? So at this point, this little chunk is done. Any questions, thoughts before I move on to the last one? No? Perfect. Well, I'll go ahead and move on to the last one, and this is the Converge, right? So again, following my customer's journey, wanting to move, pull out of an existing SSO domain, connect a vCenter to a single PSC. Great, we've done that, but now understand the journey that we have with VMware, moving to the embedded PSC. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. Pretty straightforward, and I like this. This is, again, attainable by our users. I'm going to go ahead and just click this radio button next to Lab vCenter and say Converge to embedded. Shocker, this is going to restart vCenter services. Like I said, this all does. So go ahead and I'll proceed. And it's going to ask me to prove who I am to make sure this is what we want to do. So this is going to be there's no other replication partners available, things like that. So this is just blank. I'm not doing anything with Active Directory on this one. Again, trying to keep this as vanilla as I can for my, due to my resources. So I'm going to go ahead and check this box. Again, I acknowledge I've backed my stuff up. Well, now that I've backed it up, I'm going to hit Converge. This is kind of nice. For a short time, you get some information here in the interface, which is great. We see this green bar pop up and we get a percentage. But as we have already heard, this will restart vCenter services and this interface will go away. And then we're stuck with patiently waiting or looking at varlog VMware messages like we have here in this window. Let this finish up real quick. So back to asking questions to the field team here. Have you guys had any customers leverage this tool, even the 6.5 environment, where it was just more of a command line option? Anybody doing this? Find success, failures, frustrations, parties? I don't know. What are your thoughts or findings? No? No one? Or else you're muted? To be honest, from my customers' perspectives, I have one customer, so I have three that I'm assigned to. One of them has done this in the lab, and they feel pretty confident with the process, and that's fantastic. But nobody's actually done this in production yet, at least of my handful of the customers in the TAM world. Still getting RPMs. Really exciting stuff. Oh, I see the chat there. Mark earlier made a comment about customers going or the move to from external to embedded. He said some are frustrated since they moved to external for enhanced link mode. Now they're going back. They agree with the move to make it simpler though. That's great. So again, just like we've done with the other steps here, keep in mind the makeup of my lab and try and compare it to different customer environments. They may have more resources, but a more complex environment. So this might take a little longer if they use the interface like this, the UI. Again, they just need to be patient, and very often, consider no news is good news. There's not an error or anything like that. This process, as I ran through this multiple times, took just this long. That's why every now and then I'll bounce back and forth here to the VAMI and just look at the services to see what's going on. vCenter is still showing as started. Whoops, apologize. I want to do that. I know we only have 5 more minutes left, so I'll give this another minute to see some progress. Otherwise, I'll show you what the rest of the process looks like. In fact, maybe I'll just do that. So I want this. One second here. Boom. Okay. All right, so I'm going to roll through this. So I took screenshots along the way. This will be available as well with the relics from this session on the TAM Lab site. So I'll make sure that gets posted as well. So we're talking about converging, right? And so this process is what we've seen, right? We're going to have downtime, provide some credentials, and then hit OK to start. And so, again, this looks very familiar. Here's your 8% getting RPMs. After this proceeds, what we're going to find is exactly this, what we've looked at before. Now, lab vcenter.vb.info, which is the FQDN for vCenter, is now the one authenticating me. And keep in mind what we saw before when we started was PSC01, then we moved to PSC02, and then we moved to PSC03. All along the way, the PSC responsible for authentication has changed. So here it is again. It's now the vCenter itself. And when we look at the administration section, again, now we're going to see highlighted in yellow, the vCenter is now showing as an embedded PSC, right? That's a big change. That's what we told it to do. And it sucked in those PSC functions. But what's also interesting here is PSC03 continues to exist, and it's replicating with the lab vCenter embedded PSC. So, the idea being if you have multiple vCenters leveraging a PSC, you need to move all of them before you decommission. And we saw that earlier, like step 1, right? When I tried to decommission the PSC01 platform services controller and said, hey, you got a vCenter still using me. I'm not going to do it. Right? So you have to evacuate everything. So this is nice, right? Again, it's not going to let you shoot yourself in the foot. So moving on, this time you can see the little radio button by the PSC. I went ahead and selected that and said decommission PSC. Again, vCenter will have some downtime. Surprise. And again, we're going to go ahead and provide credentials and tell it to decommission. It only let me do this because there's no vCenters pointed to it, just another PSC for replication. So we go ahead and do that. And again, we see progression. And then it fails. You know, the vCenter services stop, and so the UI fails. But you can see here that it actually shuts off the VM, right? So exciting, right? It's not that this VM is like a zombie. We just pulled out its brain and it's just kind of like existing. Like, no, it's literally shut off now, which is nice. And when we confirm, you know, functionality here, again, it shows that it's shut off. And we also see on the vCenter side, it's just not even there. And that vCenter little icon has the little purple PSC with the vCenter logo. Right, so that's kind of the process of, again, moving from one SSO domain where we had a vCenter and 2 platform services controllers to another SSO domain where we then had a vCenter and a platform service controller. And then we gobbled that up, decommissioned it. So now that vCenter has now moved from one domain to another. We no longer have platform services controllers, and it's all being provided by one vCenter server. So again, takes time on the customer side. Depends on how aggressive they want to be and what they're trying to accomplish, but it's all totally doable. It's a handful of commands. We saw that. A couple UI options. Again, you can use command line for a lot of those, and a couple command line only options. So I guess with that, let me run back here, do a refresh. This says 8%. Yep, still showing 8%. That's fun. Anyway, so I'm glad I had those. I took some screenshots. Any, since we have just a minute left, any questions, comments, thoughts, concerns? This useful?
It's very useful, Bill. Thank you.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Scott.
Definitely useful. It'll be a good conversation with customers.
Yeah, well, and that's great, right? We're always looking for those good conversations and to make sure they're informed and enabled so that when they move to whatever version, they feel comfortable doing this kind of stuff. So that's great. Well, cool. That's all I got. I would ask again that you just stay on for just one more second while I hit end meeting. So I'll stop the recording, end meeting, and please fill out the survey. That'd be fantastic. And again, if you have any ideas or are interested in presenting or know somebody who is, please let us know. It's always exciting. So again, thank you all for your time, and have a fantastic day. And we'll see you at the next TAM Lab.
Thanks, Bill.